The air in the conference room is stale, smelling faintly of nervous sweat and too much expensive cologne. Sunlight, harsh and unforgiving, slices through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in a silent judgment. Across the polished table, two faces stare back at me. His, a mask of condescending pity, the kind he perfected over years of little cruelties I'd learned to ignore. Hers, a predatory smirk, sharp and confident. They look like a matched set of vultures, picking over something they already believe is dead. My stomach is a cold, hard knot, tighter than any I've ever felt. My hands, resting on my lap, are slick with sweat, but my face... I hope my face shows nothing. A blank slate. It's all I have left right now. Before this story consumes us completely, if you've ever felt betrayed, blindsided by someone you trusted, please let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life, before the floor fell out from under it, was quiet. Predictable, maybe even a little boring from the outside, but it felt safe. Secure. We had the house, the one with the bay window overlooking the park, the one we'd painted together that first summer, laughing as more paint ended up on us than the walls. We had the routines. Morning coffee brewed just how he liked it, evenings spent on the couch, the hum of the television a comforting backdrop to our silence. And we had the business. His business. A small, specialized consulting firm he'd started from scratch years ago. I wasn't part of the day-to-day operations. My world was quieter, freelance graphic design, working from a sun-drenched corner of the house. But the business was ours. The success felt like a shared victory. The struggles were a shared burden. His long hours meant my evenings were often solitary, the quiet hum of the house sometimes feeling less comforting and more like a void, but I told myself it was for our future. For us. I handled the household finances, paid the bills, managed our investments, the boring, crucial stuff that kept the wheels turning. He handled the business end, the clients, the growth, the big decisions. A partnership, I thought. Different roles, same goal. He always told me I was the anchor, the steady hand that kept his sometimes wild ambitions grounded. He'd laugh, say he was the sails, and I was the rudder. We were steering the same ship. Looking back, maybe the cracks were always there, tiny hairline fractures I chose not to see. The late nights that stretched longer. The hushed phone calls that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. The increasing distance in his eyes, a faraway look that wasn't about work but something else, something he kept hidden. I rationalized it. Stress. The pressure of running a business. The economy. Anything but the truth that was slowly, silently, building behind the facade. The inciting incident, the moment the safe world shattered, wasn't dramatic at first. No whispered confession, no caught messages. It was just a misplaced folder. He'd been working late, again. I'd brought him a cup of tea, found him slumped over his desk, asleep. Gently, I tried to tidy up a little, clear some space, so he could sleep more comfortably. That's when I saw it. A thick manila folder, not his usual client reports. It was labeled simply, Transfer Documents. My heart gave a little flutter. Transfer? Was he selling a part of the business? Bringing in a partner? He hadn't said anything. Curiosity, innocent enough, led me to open it. The world tilted. The words on the page swam, then snapped into sickening focus. A legal document. A complete transfer of ownership. Not a partnership. Not a sale. A gift. The recipient's name blurred, then resolved into letters that punched the air from my lungs. It was her. Her name. The name I'd heard him mention with a casual dismissiveness, a new consultant, a sharp young mind joining the firm. Sarah. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped the folder. I skimmed, my eyes wide and disbelieving. The effective date was weeks ago. Weeks. He had done this weeks ago. Signed away the business. Our business. Given it away. To her. The blood roared in my ears. Gift. Transfer. Secretly. To the new consultant. The pieces slammed together with brutal force. The late nights. The distance. The hushed calls. Sarah wasn't just a consultant. She was the reason for the distance. She was the reason for the secrecy. She was the reason he had signed away his life's work. To her. I didn't wake him. I couldn't. I crept back to the bedroom, the folder clutched to my chest like a weapon, or perhaps a shield I knew wouldn't protect me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the room spinning. Sleep was impossible. The silence of the house now felt like a heavy blanket smothering me. Betrayal. It wasn't just the affair, though that was a cruel, sharp pain. It was the business. The foundation. The thing he had always said was ours. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had stolen from me. He had dismantled our shared future and handed it to someone else. The next few days were a blur of silent accusations and carefully constructed normalcy. I didn't confront him immediately. I couldn't form the words. My mind was a battlefield. How could he? How long? What did this mean? The questions circled endlessly, sharp-edged birds of prey. I watched him, saw the ease with which he moved, the lack of guilt in his eyes, the casual way he talked about his day at the business, her business now. It was a performance, and I was the unwitting audience, holding the script he thought I'd never read. The performance made the betrayal feel even deeper, dirtier. My early struggles were internal. A silent war fought in the confines of my own head. Should I confront him? Should I get a lawyer? Could I even afford a lawyer? The financial details of the transfer were murky in the document I'd found. Had he drained accounts? Was there anything left? The uncertainty was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt like a ghost in my own home. Every object seemed to mock me with memories of a life that was a lie. The photos on the wall, smiling faces oblivious to the rot beneath. His favorite armchair, where he'd sat planning his business, now her business. The air itself felt tainted. I tried calling a friend, a lawyer I knew casually. I started to explain, my voice shaking, but the words caught in my throat. How do you articulate this level of betrayal? My husband. He gave his business to his mistress. It sounded like a bad movie plot. I mumbled something about needing general advice and hung up, ashamed and more isolated than before. The days stretched into weeks. He noticed my quietness, I think, but mistook it for something else. Stress, maybe. He became solicitous in a way that made my skin crawl. Asking if I was okay, suggesting a weekend getaway. The hypocrisy was a bitter taste in my mouth. He was planning a future with her, on the foundation he had stolen from me, while pretending our life was normal. The struggle intensified as I started digging deeper. I found more documents hidden carefully. Financial statements showing large withdrawals. Emails, carefully scrubbed from his main account, but lurking in an old archive I knew the password to. Emails between them. Not just about business. Pet names. Plans for their future. Casual references to when this is all ours. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. They weren't just taking the business. They were building a life on the wreckage of mine, and they felt no remorse. I felt a cold dread settle over me. This wasn't just an affair and a bad financial decision. This was calculated. They had planned this. Planned to cut me out. Planned to take everything. I imagined their conversations, plotting, laughing about the wife, who was too clueless to notice. The thought fueled a slow-burning rage that began to eclipse the pain. Legal advice seemed out of reach. My own freelance income was modest, barely enough to cover my personal expenses if I were suddenly on my own. Our joint accounts were dwindling. It became clear that he was slowly bleeding them dry, presumably to set them up for their new life. Every transaction felt like a personal attack, a small victory for them in this undeclared war. I felt trapped. Every path I saw led to a dead end. If I confronted him without proof, he'd deny it, maybe even twist it back on me. If I left, I'd be walking away with almost nothing, leaving him and her to enjoy the fruits of his betrayal. The house, the savings, the business, all of it felt like it was slipping through my fingers like sand. There were nights I just sat in the dark, the city lights blurring through the window, and felt utterly, completely lost. What was the point? They had won. They were smarter, more ruthless. I was just the naive wife who had been played for a fool. The thought was a poison in my veins. I was drowning in despair. Everything I had believed in, everything I had built my life around, was a lie. The future I thought we were creating was already happening, but with someone else. Then came the midpoint shift, a moment of cold clarity born from the deepest despair. I was staring at the ceiling, the familiar feeling of hopelessness wrapping around me, when a memory surfaced. Not a pleasant one, but a crucial one. Years ago, when he was just starting out, scraping every penny together to build his idea, there had been a problem. A competitor had launched a similar service, using a name confusingly close to his. It had been a nasty fight. He was terrified of being crushed before he even started. We had spent weeks researching, talking to lawyers. It had been an expensive, drawn-out process. The solution? Not just defending against the competitor, but securing his own brand identity. Protecting the name. The trademark. The trademark. The word echoed in my mind. He had been so meticulous about it back then. So paranoid about protecting the brand name, the logo, the identity of the business. It was the foundation of everything, he'd said. More important than the building, more important than the equipment. It was the name, the reputation, the goodwill. My memory flashed back further. That lawyer he used. The piles of paperwork. The signing. Who had signed what? Had I signed anything? At the time, it was just another stack of papers in the mountain of bureaucracy that came with starting a business. I hadn't paid much attention. I trusted him.
But now,
doubt gnawed at me. Had I signed something related to the trademark? Something significant. A flicker of something sparked in the darkness. Not hope, not yet. Something colder, harder. A tiny, fragile seed of an idea. If the trademark was so crucial, if it was the foundation, what happened if the foundation wasn't where they thought it was? The idea grew, taking root in the barren landscape of my despair. It was a long shot. A desperate gamble.
but it was a path.
A path that didn't involve simply giving up. My turning point wasn't dramatic fireworks. It was quiet, fueled by caffeine and a grim determination that settled deep in my bones. I started digging again, but this time with a specific target: old business formation documents, legal filings, anything related to the intellectual property of his, now her, company. It was like searching for a single grain of sand on a beach. Years of paperwork, boxes stored in the attic, gathering dust. Old digital files on backup drives I hadn't looked at in ages. I worked in secret, late at night, while he slept soundly, presumably dreaming of his new life. My own sleep became almost non-existent, replaced by a wired, intense focus. I found it eventually, tucked away in a box labeled legal, old, a thick file. The trademark application and registration documents. And there, among the signatures, was mine. My signature. On the original trademark assignment document. Years ago. Back then, it had been a formality, a requirement because we were married, because some lawyer somewhere advised it was cleaner if the initial IP ownership was clear before transferring it to the corporate entity. I had signed it without a second thought. It meant nothing to me then. It meant everything now. I read the document again, my eyes scanning every line, every clause. It was dense legal jargon, but the core message was clear. I was listed as the initial owner of the trademark rights. And while the rights were later intended to be assigned to the corporation, the document trail. It was messy, incomplete, or perhaps structured in a way that left a crack, a loophole, a thin thread of ownership still tied to me. My heart didn't pound with excitement. It felt like a block of ice. A cold, hard certainty settled within me. They had taken the business, the physical assets, the client list. They had the structure, the employees, the office. But the name,
The brand.
the very identity they were trading on. Did they check the trademark registry? Had they assumed the transfer of the business automatically included the IP? Had their lawyer been sloppy? Had his lawyer been sloppy? Or had they simply never even considered it, so focused on the tangible assets they were stealing? It didn't matter. What mattered was the document in my hands. What mattered was my name on it. What mattered was the quiet, growing certainty that they had missed something fundamental. They had stolen the body, but I held the deed to the soul. The deep crisis wasn't over, but my relationship to it had changed. I wasn't just a victim drowning anymore. I was a predator, silent and unseen, waiting. I had a plan. It was audacious. It was risky, but it was mine. I needed to confirm my position. Legal documents weren't always as straightforward as they seemed to a layperson. I couldn't use the lawyer I'd initially contacted. I needed someone new, someone sharp, someone discreet. Finding the right lawyer felt like another impossible task. I had limited funds. I was operating in secret. I couldn't risk anyone, especially him, finding out what I was doing. I researched online, looking for specialists in intellectual property law, lawyers who offered free initial consultations. I used burner emails, disposable phones. The cloak and dagger felt absurd, like something out of a spy movie, but the stakes felt that high. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about striking back against the cold, calculated cruelty they had inflicted. I finally found someone. A small firm, not flashy, but with a reputation for being thorough and tenacious, especially in IP disputes. I scheduled a consultation, using an assumed name, claiming it was for a hypothetical case. I laid out the convoluted situation, omitting personal details, focusing only on the legal aspects: a business transferred, a trademark, a question of original ownership. The lawyer, a woman named Ms. Davies, listened patiently, her face impassive behind her large, sensible glasses. She asked precise, clinical questions. I showed her copies of the documents I'd found: the business transfer, the trademark registration. She leaned back in her chair, quiet for a long moment after I finished. The silence stretched, taut and nerve-wracking. Had I gotten it wrong? Was my idea flawed? Was this just another dead end? Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but the words landed with the force of a physical blow. "This is interesting," she said slowly. "The initial assignment language. It's not as clean as it should be. And the subsequent transfer to the corporation. There appears to be a missing link, or at least a disputable one, regarding the trademark rights specifically. Based on these documents, there's a very strong argument to be made that the original trademark rights never fully transferred from you." Never fully transferred. The words echoed. It wasn't just a loophole. It was a gaping hole in their plan. They had bought or been given the car, but I still held the keys to the engine.
So,
I still own it, I whispered, the hypothetical scenario suddenly terrifyingly real. She nodded slowly. Based on these documents, yes. The legal right to the name, the brand identity. It appears to still reside with you. This gives you significant leverage. Leverage. The word felt powerful. Dangerous. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just the discarded wife. I was the one holding the most valuable piece of the puzzle. We talked for a long time that day. About options. About strategy. About discretion. Ms. Davies was sharp, practical, and she saw the cold logic of the situation immediately. They had stolen the business. I could take back its identity. Without the brand name, the business was significantly devalued. Clients associated the name with the service, the reputation. Strip that away, and they were left with just assets and employees operating under a tainted or worse, legally unusable name. The plan formed, simple in its execution, devastating in its implications. I wouldn't confront him about the affair. I wouldn't fight over the house or the dwindling savings. I would wait. Let them finalize their theft. Let them feel secure in their victory. And then, I would pull the rug out from under them with the one thing they hadn't thought to steal: the name. The weight was agonizing. Living under the same roof, watching him, knowing his betrayal, knowing my secret. Each smile he gave me, each casual touch, felt like a physical violation. I perfected the art of living a double life. By day, I was the quiet wife, navigating the mundane reality of a crumbling marriage. By night, I was a strategist, working with Ms. Davies, preparing the legal documents, laying the trap. My determination hardened into something cold and sharp. This wasn't about revenge in a petty sense. It was about justice. About showing them that some things couldn't be stolen. That decency, honesty, loyalty, they had value, even if they only realized it when faced with losing everything built on lies. The deepening crisis continued, even with my secret weapon. He continued to drain accounts. He became more distant, more openly dismissive. Sarah started appearing more frequently, sometimes even stopping by the house on the pretense of dropping off paperwork. Her presence was a calculated insult, a power play. I saw the way she looked at me, pity mixed with triumph. She thought she had won. She thought I was a fool. I let them think it. I played the part. The quiet, slightly sad wife. I watched them, gathered small pieces of information, noted dates and times, filed away every casual comment he made about the business. All of it was data, feeding into the inevitable confrontation. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with a summons. A meeting requested by him, at the business office. He framed it as a discussion about the future, about dissolving our shared financial interests. It was clear what this was. The formal cutting away. The final act of dispossession. And I knew, instinctively, that she would be there. To witness. To gloat. I dressed carefully that morning. Not in morning clothes, but in something sharp, professional. Something that spoke of competence, not despair. A quiet act of defiance. Ms. Davies was not with me. We had agreed that for this initial meeting, I would go alone. They needed to underestimate me one last time. Stepping into the office felt surreal. I hadn't been there in ages. The air was different. Colder.
Tighter.
The receptionist, a new face, eyed me with faint curiosity. I was led to the conference room. The same room where, years ago, we'd signed the lease, full of hope and shared dreams. They were already there, sitting across the polished table. Him, looking uncomfortable but determined. Her, radiating confidence, dressed impeccably, looking every inch the successful businesswoman she believed she was. The vultures, waiting for the last breath. Small talk was minimal, awkward. He cleared his throat, shuffling papers. "Thanks for coming," he said, avoiding my eyes.
We.
Sarah and I, we wanted to discuss the transition. How best to formalize everything. Formalize their theft, he meant. Sarah smiled, a slow, cruel unfolding of her lips. "It's been a smooth process, thankfully," she purred. "Taking over has been such a natural fit. The clients have responded so well." My hand was still slick with sweat under the table. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment. Years of love, months of pain, weeks of cold planning. It all converged on this single point. "I understand you've transferred ownership of the business entity to Sarah," I said, my voice steady, neutral. I watched their faces. He flinched slightly. She puffed up, ready to assert her claim. "Yes," he said, forcing himself to meet my gaze. "It was the best way forward. For everyone." Sarah leaned forward. "The business is thriving under new leadership," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Perhaps it was time for a change in direction. A fresh perspective. A fresh perspective built on my ruins. I nodded slowly, as if considering their words. "I see," I said. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. I looked directly at Sarah. Her smug smile was unwavering. She thought she had won. "And the trademark?" I asked. The question hung in the air. He frowned, confused. Sarah's smile wavered, just slightly. "The trademark," he repeated. "That's part of the business, obviously." "Is it?" I asked, my voice still calm, but a steel edge creeping in. "Are you sure about that? Did you check the original assignment documents? The registration details?" Confusion flickered across his face. Sarah's eyes narrowed. The predatory look was replaced by a hint of suspicion. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rising. I reached into my bag.
Slowly.
Deliberately. I pulled out a single folder. Not the full legal file Ms. Davies had prepared, but a copy of the key document. The original trademark assignment, with my name clearly printed as the owner and my signature bold at the bottom. I slid it across the table, stopping it in front of Sarah. She picked it up, her expression wary. Her eyes scanned the page. As she read, the color drained from her face. The smugness evaporated, replaced by disbelief, then dawning horror. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice thin. "That," I said, my voice gaining strength, filling the room, "is the original trademark assignment for the business name. Signed years ago. You'll notice my name is listed as the original owner. My lawyers seem to think the subsequent transfer to the corporation wasn't quite completed correctly. Or perhaps the rights were never actually included in the business entity transfer you so conveniently arranged." I looked at my husband. His face was a mask of shock. He grabbed the document from Sarah, his hands shaking. He read it, his eyes wide. He looked from the paper to me, then back to the paper. Denial warred with dawning comprehension.
That's
impossible," he stammered. "Is it?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. The cold knot in my stomach had loosened, replaced by a quiet, potent power. "Check the public records. Call your lawyer. Call the lawyer who handled the transfer if you can find them after their apparent oversight. The trademark for your business is still legally owned by me." Sarah gasped, a sharp, ugly sound.
You can't do that," she cried.
"That's the business." "No," I said, my voice calm, final. "That's the name, the brand, the goodwill. Without it, what exactly did you buy? What are you operating under? A name you don't have the right to use?" His face was contorted with rage and disbelief. "You knew," he screamed, slamming his fist on the table. "You knew this. All this time." "I learned," I corrected, my voice level. "Just like I learned about the affair. Just like I learned you planned to take everything." His face was bright red. He looked between me and Sarah, who was staring at me with pure hatred. "You tricked us," he yelled. "You betrayed me," I said softly, the pain returning, a sharp counterpoint to my victory. "You thought you could steal everything and get away with it. You were wrong. You took the body, but I kept the soul. And without the soul, the body is just dead weight." I stood up. I didn't need to say anything else. The silence that followed my words was deafening, filled only with their ragged breathing and the quiet hum of the office's air conditioning. Their faces were pictures of absolute, blindsided devastation. They had been so confident, so secure in their ruthlessness. They had never imagined the quiet wife could be the one holding the deadliest weapon. "My lawyer will be in touch," I said, my voice businesslike now, "to discuss the terms of either selling the trademark back to you at a significantly revised price, or licensing it, or perhaps," I let a small, cool smile touch my lips, "I'll find a new company to license it to, one that appreciates its true value." I turned and walked out, leaving them sitting there amidst the wreckage of their carefully planned betrayal. The stale air of the conference room clung to me, but outside, the air felt lighter, cleaner. The aftermath wasn't a sudden burst of happiness. It was a slow, complex unspooling. There were legal battles, of course. They fought it hard. But Ms. Davies was right. The documentation was clear. The trademark was mine. They had built their empire on a foundation that didn't belong to them. The options were clear. They could buy it from me, effectively paying for the very thing they had tried to steal. They could license it, paying me ongoing royalties for the right to use the name. Or I could license it to a competitor, leaving their business with a worthless name and no brand identity. They chose to buy. The price was steep. Much steeper than anything they had planned to get by cutting me out. It wasn't just the market value. It included the cost of their betrayal, the pain they inflicted, the future they tried to steal. It wasn't about greed. It was about restitution. About imbalance corrected. The money didn't erase the pain, though. The house felt empty, even after he was gone. The silence was no longer a comforting hum but a stark reminder of the life that had been shattered. Winning felt hollow in some ways, a cold satisfaction, but not joy. The trust was broken, irreparable. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger capable of chilling cruelty. I sold the house. It held too many ghosts. I took the money from the trademark sale, the settlement from the divorce, which, thanks to the leverage I held, was far more equitable than he'd intended, and I started over. I didn't rebuild the same life. I built a new one. One I owned completely. I invested in myself, in my own graphic design business, expanding it, taking on bigger clients. I found joy in creating, in building something that was solely mine, built on my own integrity and effort. I never saw him or Sarah again. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. The business struggled for a while after the forced buyback, weighed down by the debt they incurred. Their relationship apparently didn't survive the financial strain and the mutual recriminations. The empire they had tried to build together on lies crumbled. My victory wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was born of pain and betrayal. But it was a victory nonetheless. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the fool. I was the quiet woman who remembered where the real power lay, who found strength in the wreckage, and who ultimately held the keys to the kingdom they thought they had stolen. The scars remain, a reminder of the cost of misplaced trust. But so does the quiet certainty that I survived. I didn't just survive. I reclaimed what was mine, and I built something new, something real, from the ashes. If this story of finding strength in the face of betrayal hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.